Welcome to the Sweet Arts of Fighting podcast. We have Edward Baker back on the pod. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for coming back on. It's been a while since we've chatted, to be honest. It's been probably well over a year. So what's been happening with you? I see you've been creating more content on social media and everything. What's been going on?
Yeah, like you said, on the treadmill of
Yep.
content creation. Yep. So, been growing Fight Lab, which is my online strength and conditioning service for fighters. Been lucky to take on a couple more professional boxers this year, which is great. Just kind of building out the service and also trying to gather data and record what I'm doing with as many of the guys that I can, certainly the ones that I see based where I am in and around Gloucestershire, southwest England. So, using the day job at the university to bring them in, getting some students involved, gathering some data so that I'm actually looking at the numbers and seeing if the programs are doing what they should be doing.
What kind of data are you collecting?
So right now I've got a couple guys who are fighting on a show at the end of March, and we typically have like an 8-week count and a 1-week taper. So every week over this 8 weeks, as part of their strength and conditioning, I'm doing some jump monitoring, counter movement jump, drop jump, and also punch force using the force plate that I have as well. So we're looking at kind of the variability day to day, and also, is the jump monitoring suitable for boxers? Does it tell a story kind of in line with their adaptations and training load? But what about punch force? Is that another metric that changes? Is it sensitive to kind of neuromuscular fatigue? These are questions that I want to know the answers to.
So what are you measuring with? Are you just measuring jump height, or are you looking at different jump kinetics?
Looking at the metrics underneath it. So we're using valve force dex. So I've got a little selection of metrics. Obviously, we're looking at height as the main one, but I'm looking at RSI, so the time they spend basically on the ground. I'm looking at propulsive power, so the concentric force, and I'm looking at the relative force, force to body weight, because obviously they're both, one's fighting at featherweight and at super featherweight, or maybe lightweight, depending on the opponent. So they'll be cutting weight in this camp. So I'm interested to see that as the body changes. Are we getting a difference in kind of relative force, and how is that changing punch force as well?
So how often are you doing the jump test then during the fight camp?
So bi-weekly, and the punch force once a week, just kind of logistically.
Yeah. Are you seeing any trends currently?
Yeah. So we're seeing fairly typical. So we're this is week 5 of kind of the 8-week training, which is divided into 2 phases. And typically that first 4 weeks, I see an improvement in everything, because we're doing heavy strength training, complex training, lots of aggressive jumps, and nobody's started cutting weight yet, and fatigue hasn't caught up. So the first kind of 2 or 3 weeks, there's a modest improvement in the force, in the RSI, in the jump height, and the punch force. I think there's a learning effect too, right? Because they're hitting it's padded, but they're still hitting an inertially relevant force plate. So then maybe the first couple are tentative, and then it's increased. I'm getting 5 punches and 5 jumps every time, so I can look at the variability. But yeah, pretty typical profile. They go up for a couple of weeks. Now they're starting to bite. So now they're cutting weight. The sparring is longer rounds. They're tired, right? So I'm seeing now a reduction in the forces produced, and a reduction in the outcome in the jump height. But the punch force is stable or increasing.
Interesting. Okay. Does that influence your training programs at all then, currently?
Well, this is where this is the downside of the kind of researcher who's also the coach, the complete bias of the whole thing, because I see that and I'm like, the S&C is working. Like, I know what I'm doing. They should be doing those loaded jumps, and look, it's underpinning their performance. So naturally I'm making that assumption that by choosing the correct programming, we've managed to preserve that neuromuscular performance. It's probably to do with the fact that they are boxers and specialized in punching. So even if they're tired, they're not special jumpers, they're not specialized at jumping. So maybe they're seeing a dip there, but they're still able to produce the outcome. Of course, I'm not measuring how they're doing it with the jump, with the force. We get to see, like, Are they taking longer in eccentric phase? Like, is that the fatigue showing up? I'm just getting the outcome with the
Yeah.
punch because of the logistical constraints. But that's all I'm interested in as well, is, is the outcome. So at the moment, they're keeping that stable or improving it slightly, which is good because we've trimmed a couple kilos off, right? So they've been able to maintain punch force even as they're cutting weight.
I guess that's why you may not have the time or the equipment to do like 3D 3D cameras and start to look at, are they winding up more? Or are they, sitting down more,
Yeah, I mean,
etc.
this is what, if I had an eighth day in the week, right? That's what I would be doing. That's the gold standard, exactly as you said. Force plate under each foot, full body kinematic marker, 3D camera, right? The with a normal budget of that I'm working with and the time constraints, this is not feasible.
Mm.
And I'm taking my research in a more applied direction for that exact reason, right? I was in a rabbit hole trying to bring to bear all the kit. You can't get it to talk to each other unless it's all made by the same manufacturer too. So these were some of the issues I was having. So I've gone in a much more applied direction because that's really what I'm interested in anyway, is tweaking performance.
Mm. Was there much training? Were they working with you before coming into camp?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they were doing a lot of the stuff anyway, and then it kind of just ramped up from the start of the fight camp, and that's when you started to see even more,
Yeah, I've got
I guess,
two
gains.
athletes coming to the lab every week. I mean, there are different levels in their career. So one's 10-0, and the other one's had his professional debut. The one who's 10-0 has been training with me for over 4 years, like consistently, and the other fighter for like 6 months. So it's quite interesting to see kind of the differences there. And the idea is that via these small kind of intensive case studies, I could kind of build a body of work that I can apply to, other athletes. Yeah.
Do you see the differences between them in these tests as you go through fight camp?
Certainly kind of in your jump metrics. Yeah, the forces and the jump height for sure. And probably indirectly, the stronger you are, the more resilient to the week in, week out fatigue you are. Okay. So the bigger strength base it's common sense, but the day-to-day training is taking less out of those stronger athletes.
Yeah, there's actually some good research on that. It was a while ago, showing strong athletes were able to handle higher workloads. I can't remember what the paper was. I'd have to dig it up somewhere. But I actually wanted to. You posted something recently, and I titled this video on that thing on your super circuits. And super circuits. They look damn cool. Honestly, they look damn hard too. And I was like, my legs are going just watching it. So explain to myself and the audience what these super circuits are and what you're trying to achieve out of them.
Yeah, so I've completely unapologetic about calling it super circuits. Often I'll say like there's no magic exercise, all that bullshit.
These are magic.
You know what? These are these are my circuits, super circuits. So I said in the post that developed this working with wheelchair rugby, right? So worked with wheelchair rugby for GB for the Rio cycle, and then carried on with a couple of players for the Tokyo cycle where we won a gold medal. And that sport is interesting. You've got spinal injured athletes, and then you've got athletes without a spinal injury but a different type of impairment. And what you have with athletes with a spinal injury to the neck is that the autonomic nervous system is different. And what it really means is their heart rate cannot go as high as somebody without the spinal injury. They're limited to about 125 beats per minute. Okay, so that stroke volume and that ability to deliver kind of aerobic energy system is compromised, and therefore they're heavily reliant on peripheral muscle endurance, right? So I needed a training method that was going to kind of build extreme kind of endurance in the muscles of the arms and shoulders for these players. And it also happened to be that particular athletes we had would stay on for the whole game. There's rolling subs in that game, but they would put in a longer shift, and they're working at a more continuous rather than a more intermittent rate. So I got to practice on them as guinea pigs, and we did some absolutely horrific, like long, like timed sets of bench presses and bench pulls and chin ups, and dips, stuff like that. And I work with different kind of work to rest ratios. There's not a whole bunch of literature on it, but there is some. and just taking some kind of common sense guidelines. And then I've transferred it into boxing and adapted the exercises for boxers, and particularly for that kind of elastic, athletic quality that we really want to see, that ability to kind of sustain that bouncing, athletic, very efficient movement pattern. So I can walk you through how we do it, but that's the background and the context to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I guess you say the avid listeners of the podcast will understand what you're talking about when you're talking about these peripheral adaptations in the muscle and kind of what you're targeting there. But do you want to maybe just, before we go into kind of what the circuits involve, maybe let's just go into what makes these circuits more peripherally targeted versus, I guess you'd say, centrally around the heart.
So using exercises with a long range motion, so like a real deep squat, things like that, and using the right work to rest period and the right cadence, so the right kind of amplitude of the jump and or the movement, the exercise, whatever it may be. And we're typically using a 1-to-1 kind of work to rest ratio, so 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, or similar. And then this focuses the effort, more on the muscle and the muscle tendon kind of working together. More legs and less lungs, if you like, or more arms and shoulders and less lungs. And there's kind of you have to pick the right exercise where there's kind of a rhythmic cadence. It's something that's continuous, repeatable, kind of cyclic, so that the athlete can time their breathing and the contract relax kind of nature of it as well. And again, that puts it more on, brings that the relative kind of heart rate down, but it increased demand on the muscle. And there's a skill component to it, as well as a kind of raw physical component. And there's a timing to it as well.
One more question before we go into the circuits then, because some of them, I guess, are more bouncy and are more elastic. Are you, would that not make it almost like less muscular because you have that elastic component to it?
Yeah, well, that's the kind of eventual goal, right? Is to get to the point where, you've built a golf ball or a rubber band.
Okay, gotcha.
Where the minimal amount of kind of muscular work is being done to achieve the same kind of external mechanical output or movement. So yeah, that's right. And so you could think of it as on a continuum from running on sand where there's just no recovery from it, and it's all muscular work, right up to doing pogos or bounding on a stiff track, in spikes where you've got the maximum amount of recovery from the ground. The muscle's almost quasi-isometric and you're getting as much recovery from the tendon. And, you need a really good training base before you can get there. It's not for everybody. You have to be very strong before you can do it.
All right, run us through these circuits then. How does it start and how does it progress? And exercise examples would be awesome as well.
Give you some example exercises, yeah. So a jump, what I'll do is pair. I'll do a lower body followed by an upper body. All right. And so that is gonna increase some stress on the heart because it's gonna have to shove, the blood to different areas of the body. And we'll use some kind of total body exercise as well. So we'll do kind of some dynamic like jump squats, but they'll be deep, on the balls of the feet, and they might involve jumping over an object or kind of turning a little bit in the air. You can begin with a basic sort of squat jump in place, and then you can kind of add more of a coordination demand to it.
And that's sub-maximal, right?
They're sub-maximal, but I'm looking for, if we're doing 30 seconds, again, we might start with 15 to 20 and then kind of build up over a period of weeks. But I'm looking for around 1 rep per second. So I'm looking at 25 to 30 like squat jumps, and they've got to be a full range in terms of depth, across that time period. So might pick squat jump, and then we'll do there's like a plyometric or a stretch shortening cycle press up variation in that Instagram reel I posted. So some kind of continuous, press up based movement, particularly kind of stretching that tricep tendon, and across the shoulder. We'll have something vertical press. So that might be kind of squat to press. an upper body pull. Now, whether that's kind of a chin up or a body row that again has that kind of elastic and repeated quality to it. The rowing ones are harder to get the right cadence. You can use a banded attachment or a cable if you have a heavy enough one. And then we'll have maybe something a little bit more trunk, like with the landmine, or again, kind of with a cable or something like that, where there's that with a whole body tension, almost kind of ischemic, and then you've got to work the muscles in that environment as well. You might put pogos in there or tuck jumps, other kind of dynamic jumping or lunging exercises as well. And we'll typically do 4 to 6 exercises, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and we'll do 4 to 6 rounds. So it's 22 to 30 minutes, of continuous activity, but on that 30 on, 30 off, and building efficiency. So I'm really interested that the final round, looks the same or as close to as the first round. So it's one of these ones where you don't want to be emptying your tank early and then it just degenerates. The idea is to prolong, almost like extensive plyometry.
It actually reminds me a lot of Vern Gambetta's leg circuit. It's pretty much the same principle, but his is all legs, and it's absolutely killer because it's the actual leg. The full leg circuit is 5 rounds, bodyweight squat, 20 reps, and you, as you mentioned, try and get cadence every second.
Yeah.
Just forward lunge, 20 reps, step up, 20 reps, and then 10 jump squats, and then you do that 5 rounds, no rest.
Nice.
I still haven't been able to complete it. I have to go through the progression. Even going through the progression is killer.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Dude, just lower body tortures you, but it's one of his I guess work capacity things he does before. Like if you can do that, you can do all the different plyometrics and stuff, and it's a pretty cool little thing. It's just pretty much the same principles as what you've got going there, which is really cool. I guess with those example exercises, then are you changing them often, or are they running the same circuit, say for 4 weeks?
I've changed them. The slightly psychotic aspect of the S&C coach is like how much can they take? Like how far can I go with this? So I began thinking of a couple of athletes that I've kind of I do this with on a regular basis. Regular being like the first half of a training camp. We started with much less taxing variations. So rather than jumping, it might be just a kind of a little more low amplitude squat. So holding a kettlebell and doing like a wide stance squat, maybe getting 25 reps like that, but without displacing the center of mass as far as you would with a jump, and just a regular press up, and more kind of regular exercises, and then increasing basically I want to see that either the center of mass go further vertically, for every rep, or I want to see, bigger amplitude movement. I want to see more of the stretch shortening cycle happen, repeatedly. That's kind of how you increase intensity. And so, it's not, I've got athletes that can do 15, 16 pull-ups in that 30-second window, and they can do that for 6 sets.
Damn, okay.
And you've got, that your shoulder girdle, your biceps, your elbows, they're healthy, they're resilient, they can stand up to the pad work, the sparring, all that kind of stuff.
Are you trying to use mainly these ballistic style exercises? And next, you mentioned sometimes you do squat and press. Is it mainly trying to get the ballistic stuff so you can get that kind of tendon more involved?
Yeah, so and that's where you mentioned earlier, you've definitely got your athletes are on this continuum, aren't they, from kind of more springy to less springy. So depending on the athlete and what we want to achieve, it might be that I'll provide more of the stretch shortening cycle type activities because I want to promote that elasticity in that person. Perhaps if that's not them or that's not their style, we might look at a little bit more of that almost kind of static. And certainly for grapplers, I'm going to bring that stuff in as well because that's more in the nature type of work. So yeah, it depends. I mean, there's an argument for, do you bring up, say, the plyometric capability of somebody who's lacking it, or do you make their strength, a super strength? Yeah, do you really pursue it? And I think that depends on the athlete themselves, like where they're at. Is this a 18, 19-year-old is relatively young training age? So, you need to improve everything. Or is this somebody who's nearing the end of their career and, they need to be kind of turn their strengths into super strengths? So it depends on the person. Yeah.
How often are you doing these circuits a week, and where do they fit in the training week?
Typically once a week. You can do it twice a week. If there's a serious need for that kind of muscular endurance, and you think that's something that's holding the athlete back. But I found once a week, works well, and there is a visible improvement week on week, typically measured by the number of reps in that same time episode and the consistency quality of the movement. So put this early in the week, in the morning, first training session of the day. If boxing's in the afternoon, it would replace a run.
Gotcha.
It would replace a run. So, and then we'll put, kind of a strength power session elsewhere in the week. The week starts to fill up, so you've got to be smart where you put things. And I get my guys to run less in camp, and this time of the year, to be honest, do it all on the treadmill is what I recommend. Just from the temperature and kind of upper respiratory infection risk perspective, because you can govern everything a bit more. And so I've got them down to maybe 1 or 2 runs, kind of interval sprints. Those tend to take it out of the legs more, actually, than the circuit. So I can afford to put the circuit a little closer to important things like sparring, and maybe we put the running, elsewhere and give 48 hours of recovery.
That's going to be my other question with this as well. So how much of this circuit, or does it replace much of the actual, say, strength and power session you mentioned, or your other conditioning? Because obviously you're doing a lot of your plyometric work in this. So does that change your, say, strength power session quite a bit?
Yeah, so if I've got, again, depends how strong you are. So for the athletes that are strong enough, then the circuit and plyos that you can do kind of elsewhere are intense enough of a stimulus that we've even left kind of traditional strength training for 6-7 weeks in the part, and the athlete has not detrained. They've maintained like maximum strength when we've come back to test it after the fight. That is not the case for athletes with a lower training age and a lower level of kind of absolute strength. So for them, we'll have to keep, a heavy strength training session somewhere else in the week to support that. And so again, it's depending on the athlete. Those that need more sparring or want to maybe the sparring twice a week and they're doing 10 rounds, 12 rounds even, I'm going to scale back the volume of SSC to allow them to perform in the sparring. So I typically run that circuit that we mentioned once a week for 4 weeks, first half of camp, and then I'll change it slightly for not slightly, I'll change it for the second half of camp. The volume is down, the intensity is up, the rest period is up, and it's much more kind of a peaking, plyometric type circuit.
So it's typically then one day will be the circuit, and then the other day will be like a strength power, like traditional lifting session. And those are kind of 2 big strength training days.
Exactly right. Yeah. So the other day is just like what you would recognize as a pretty traditional, full body, so lower body strength lift. Pretty much always train in complex pairs. So, trap bar deadlift and a jump, or a squat and a jump, a bench press and a throw of some form. In that session. Yeah. Don't think I remember the last time I did anything other than complex training really with fighters, just because, it's time efficient, efficient. If you've got 3-4 days a week to get in the gym and lift, like, fantastic. Go for it. Do more traditional, get more volume in. But the reality is I might get 45 minutes, in the gym with them, or they've got 45 minutes if they're following me, remotely and following a program remotely. So it has to be the most efficient way.
What's the kind of minimal volume you're looking at in some of these sessions? I think some people get caught up with, they need to do, 4+ sets of certain exercises, and, you start to get into these high volume, almost like bodybuilding routines. So what's that kind of minimum volume you're looking at?
My experience, you need a lot less than you think or that you read.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I would say the minimal effective dose, such that you progress, is the one that you should prescribe. And so for the great majority of people, I might prescribe, say, 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps in a major compound lift. But I say to them, the last set counts. So, it's a couple of light warm-up sets,
Mm.
and then, you're progressively increasing. And most people can PB every week that way for like 6 months, 9 months, without interruption, because they're not meatheads like us, maybe that are training, train 15 years, and you got to sweat your guts out to lift an extra 2 kilos.
Yeah.
It's not like that. They're boxers or fighters, so they've got loads of other training going on, and their neuromuscular system is not very well developed in the weight room. So they've got this massive window of gains. And to be honest, if you just add 5 kilos to your last set, week in, week out for a year, then you're going to enjoy uninterrupted progress, and it's going to transfer into the sport. And I don't see a reason to do more volume for the sake of doing volume.
So it's like one main working set then, basically, like one top set you're kind of working towards.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously getting, if
You
you
got
get,
your stuff under it, yeah.
yeah, you're getting 25 kind of reps there, they're good quality reps. But yes, if you beat last week's weight by 2.5 kilos, and it's still like an RPE 8, you've got a couple left in the tank and you feel good, then that to me is progress, and you're triggering an adaptation. And there's no need to kind of um, go beyond that. There are occasions if you might more aggressively chase, a strength adaptation, but you've got to balance what it's taking out of the athlete, what it's taking away from them elsewhere in the week.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe just give, you mentioned obviously you do like a squat and a jump and then like a bench and a throw. Is there anything else in that session for that strength session?
Yeah, so I might even do 3 exercises. So the sessions this week have been regular warm up, right? And then we'll do trap bar deadlift, and probably 2 to 3 reps, and it's quite heavy. And the athletes that I've trained, if I'm thinking back to Tuesday morning of this week, are a little bit more advanced. So we might be up at kind of 7 or 8 sets there, because it's going to take a couple of sets. Your absolute strength is greater. It takes you a few sets to kind of get up to the correct weight. So we might do, say, 3 reps trap bar deadlift. We'll rest 30 seconds. We'll do repeated counter movement jumps with a barbell. And following a really good paper out of Brazil from a couple of years ago, if you just stick an LPT on a broomstick and do some counter movement jumps and look at the peak power, you should add a little bit of weight and just keep going until you maximize the peak power. As soon as you put too much on, it goes back down again. You stop. Um, if you just want to, that kind of 15 to 20 kilos is around the sweet spot for most. So if you're a little bit lighter, if you're maybe the athlete's maybe 56 kilos or under, okay, you go to 10. If your athlete's like 80 kilos or over, maybe you go to 25. But for most athletes, a 15 to 20 kilo barbell for kind of 5 to 8 aggressive counter movement jumps is around the sweet spot where they maximize mechanical power. So we'll do that, rest another 30 seconds, and then we'll go to a drop jump, like a 30 to a 45 centimeter box. We'll do a drop jump. I typically drop jump to a higher box, because I feel that it constrains the time better. It forces the athlete to project vertically better. So it'll be, heavy trap bar, loaded counter movement jump, unloaded drop jump. And we might do between 4 to 8 sets, depending on the level of the athlete, how prepared they are. For upper body, we'll do some kind of heavy press. So for the technically competent with the good shoulders, I might even do a push press or something like that, or even like a jerk. Boxers with those kind of shoulders are few and far between. I might do just in terms of achieving that like overhead position. I do like a banded bench press. I like an Arthur Bertabiev style bench press with the pad on the bar, so that we can be as aggressive, right, with that coupling between the eccentric and concentric phases, right? So like a banded bench press or a bench press throw. And then, a couple of medicine ball throws, and we might do a double arm and a rest, and then kind of a single arm more in like a punching position. Or we might do a drop press up, and then progress towards a med ball, so increase the velocity as we get closer to the fight. And then for a pull, we might do like a weighted chin up or a bench pull. And then we might do like a bench pull and release, so you kind of body, decline row, you pull yourself up, you release, and you catch again. So something like that, where we can get similar kind of movement speeds to that upper body pressing, the highest velocity that we can get, basically.
Nice. And that's kind of like your three complex session, 45 minutes done.
Yep, that's it. And then if you've got time, we do some neck and some torso work, at the end, or, maybe calf or wrist, some kind of robustness, which I think trying to get everybody to do this as a matter of course, week in, week out, either do it themselves, if they're disciplined enough, or if I've got time, I'll direct that and make sure they're doing that. And again, I like plenty of variety, where that's concerned. So, and with the complexes, again, depends on the athlete. You don't need to do the same exercise week in, week out. I think you can do a pin squat, you can do a box squat, safety bar squat, trap bar deadlift. There's no reason to necessarily do the same thing week in, week out. Again, they're not powerlifters or weightlifters. You're looking at kind of expressing force against the ground, with maximal intent. So I do think a bit of variety is good too.
That's true. And you mentioned obviously you do the 7 weeks and you have the 1 week taper. How does the program change then during that taper period?
Yeah, 8 weeks and then 8 weeks and then a week's taper. So I'll start to bring it down in week 8 in terms of the volume. So pretty typical guidelines. I'll probably reduce the volume by like 50% in week 8, but maintain the intensity. Maybe even go for kind of a PB. But just bring the number of reps down, maybe the number of sets down. And then really in my mind, the taper begins 10 to 11 days out from fight night. I don't always tell the athlete because fight week is fight week, and it's just like that's set. I train right up to the Saturday before the Saturday I fight, and then the 7 days before the fight is fight week, and that's when the taper begins. But there's some research that we get that wrong, and in fact that if you athlete is tested after the fight, they're still super compensating in some of their physical tests. Even like aerobic capacity is going up 4, 5, 6 days after the fight, and this suggests that it's just they just do as much training as they can tolerate for the fight camp, and then they kind of take their foot off the gas 7 days before, but they've got to lose a load of weight in that time. And in fact, they've accumulated a lot of fatigue that needs to be dissipated. So I'm starting mine, 10, 11 days out. So I'm starting to reduce the volume of like heavy eccentric work, reduce the overall training volume. If we're doing interval sprints, I'm bringing the number of reps down. And then during that fight week, much more about recovery, regeneration. Again, like not tearing your muscles down, not doing too much eccentric work, not having any muscle buffering. So all that's done by that point. So making sure we're not creating metabolic fatigue or things in the muscle where you're getting that burning, aching sensation, because you just want that recovery. So short and sharp, alactic power. I'm a big proponent of doing your warm-up, your fight warm-up every day in fight week. The one you're going to use with your coach, with the pads, etc., backstage, doing that and bringing it a little bit later in the day so it gets closer and closer to the time you're going to fight.
Nice. I like that. And as you mentioned, like you can, as you mentioned before, you can do much less than you think and still progress. And as you mentioned during the tape period, people obviously, it's a mental game, right? Because people are like, I feel like I haven't done enough, or I haven't trained in 4 days, or I haven't lifted, or whatever it is in 4 days, and it's Thursday and you fight Saturday or whatever. You're like, I should do something today, otherwise I'm not going to be ready, Yeah, it's kind of balancing that out, which is probably the hardest part of the actual taper versus actually tapering.
I totally agree. It's mental torture because you've been focused on doing as much as possible, and to the fighter, discipline is training hard, right?
Mm.
So, but then you get to that, you can't get fitter in the last week, but you can fuck it up. So you
Mm.
need to make sure that you don't. So yeah, the discipline changes, and in fight week, it's leaving the gym feeling like you're ready to do loads more, but you're not going to. And sticking with everything else that you need to do, the weight cutting and so forth. But yeah, it is very difficult because you feel, obviously, the more recovered you feel, the more ready to go. You've got all this excess energy and the nerves, everything of the approaching fight. So yeah, it becomes more difficult to manage that.
How close is your last session to the actual fight?
Well, we'll still like lift, on the Monday. If they're fighting Saturday, we'll lift on the Monday, but it'll be more like a priming
Yeah.
session. So if you've been used to 15-minute warm up and then kind of 8 sets of 3 to 5 reps, or 3 exercises in a complex, then we're going to do a similar warm up, but then we're going to abbreviate that session. So, we're going to be working at 75% to 80% of the weights you were lifting week in, week out. And we're doing, 1, 2 reps, and we're doing maybe two working sets. So it's enough to stimulate the nervous system, to feel like really sharp, powerful, tap into that feeling. There should be that kind of the intoxicating feeling of being powerful, strong that you've built across your camp. Feel that way, but you're not creating any fatigue because your training tolerance is up here, right? And you're just introducing a very, very low level kind of stimulus in terms of the volume. So yeah, still lift on the Monday. We might do some non-impact short intervals, assault bike, like 6 second peak power with plenty of rest on the Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest. But the rest of it is shadow boxing, technical training, some fast pads, that kind of stuff.
Walk me through the conditioning as well, because we touched a little bit obviously with the circuits, but you talked about the various running and interval sprints you're doing. Are you also gearing these trying to, I guess, bias the peripheral adaptations, as you mentioned earlier, because that was kind of like the main topic around these circuits? Or are you looking to maybe just kind of do the opposite to what your circuits are doing and maybe go more central?
Well, I think it's always, Andrew will correct me. It's always a bit peripheral and a bit central, right? It's never really kind of completely one or the other, but certainly.
Funny enough, Andrew actually just commented saying, "Great to see it on the podcast." So there you go.
Hey man. Yeah, he might be able to contribute to the comments on this. Certainly following, his advice and the advice of others in that space in camp. The goal for my athletes, the ones that I'm working closely with, is that they're never not training. So when they're off camp, they're using that opportunity to get the systemic adaptations, right? So to increase the left ventricle, to proliferate mitochondria with their more steady state stuff. They can use that time to do that, and they're entering like the 8 weeks with a really good kind of aerobic base. And then we've got this opportunity when the volume of boxing or sports training goes up and is more important. We've got that opportunity to not spend so much time pounding the pavement, but to be more time efficient and use these super maximal sprints or high intensity intervals and get those more kind of peripheral adaptations, which, it does seem to be spin up quite quickly, 4 to 6 weeks in terms of being able to create adaptations. Obviously difficult to hold on to if for no other reason than who the hell wants to do 30-second super maximal bike sprints all year round? Like no, like only a madman would want to do that, right? So, and it's very difficult to actually get the psychological intent, to really do that. Truly the intensity that is required. That's why I think it belongs in the context of a defined, training camp period. And it's hard in the moment, but as we know, it's not taking as much out of you as running, say, 5, 6, 7 miles a day. So yeah, I'm looking at biasing those adaptations within that window of time. We do still run, I'm a big fan of what Joel Jameson would call like a cardiac power interval.
Mm.
That's really 1 to 2 minutes above 90% of max heart rate, and then recover to 125 beats per minute, however long that takes, and repeat that. So 6 to 10 reps. Do that on the treadmill so that I can see the speed and incline and see some progress there. And I think that's been very, very effective for my guys. But that is hard too, and that
Yeah.
takes out of the legs, right? So you know, that's taking it out of the legs a little more than the assault bike or the stationary bike sprints. Um, what it's very good for, apart from the adaptations, both centrally and peripherally, is the control of the breathing, which is like a major
Mm.
thing that, again, no one really talks about, but mastering your own like breathing rate and having the feedback of your heart rate and like learning to control your breathing and bring your heart rate down, ideally in a minute or less, because that's the break that you get. This is absolutely massive for performance.
On that topic, are you doing any what do they call them? Like resisted breathing? Like, those devices where, what do they call them? Lung trainers or whatever they are?
You
Does
mean
that
like
make it in it?
Baz Rutten's got one,
Yeah,
hasn't
there
he?
you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did the power breathe. We did, funnily enough, going back to wheelchair rugby, we did a pilot study using the power breathe because, again, with kind of the interruption of the spinal cord at the cervical level, that the person hasn't got like full access to diaphragmatic breathing,
Mm.
inspiratory muscles that around your ribcage and stuff. So we looked at, can we increase kind of the tidal flow with the power breathe? And the short story is we didn't really get anywhere with it. I don't know much about. I don't know any published kind of studies. I'm sure there are some, but no, I don't use resisted breathing. Um, what I do is act like a complete madman and demonstrate what I want in terms of the deep breathing, right? So like the real forced inhale through the nose, a brief hold, and then a long slow exhale through the mouth. So obviously what you want to do when you're running at 20 kilometers an hour on the treadmill and you jump your feet to the side is kind of gasp, like a deer
Mm.
that's being chased, right? And you've got this real high sympathetic tone and the deep shallow breathing. And that's the urge, right? But you can overcome it. And so you can get control. And as soon as you can regulate your breathing and particularly focus on the long exhale, you're going to see the heart rate dropping like so fast. And it does recover you. And once the athlete gets it, they're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and then they can take that into training and sparring. And everyone that's got it that I've showed this to has reported back that it's a game changer in terms of that 1 minute rest or even 30-second rest in sparring because it allows them to bring their heart rate under control. And as we know, if you're inducing that more parasympathetic tone, now you can take on information from your coach, you can think about your tactics, you can be more present and in the moment and in less of a kind of panic state. And the
Mm.
more you do that, the more you're in control. So this is a real performance lever, is this breath control. Yeah.
How does the conditioning look then progressing through that fight camp? You mentioned some of the bike sprints, you mentioned some of these 1 to 2 minute runs. How does that look as you go through?
So we'll do the 1 minute intervals on the treadmill. My ideal is 1 minute intervals on the treadmill, and that's 1 minute above 90%. So it's going to take you a little while to get there, particularly
Gotcha.
in a couple of reps. Then you hold above 90 for the minute, and then you recover to 125. Now I'll do that once a week for the full 8 weeks. We might start with 6 to 8 reps. We'll get up to 10 reps, even 12, and then we'll bring it down again, maybe 6 reps in week 8. So ideally that's once a week, and then we'll do kind of similar to Andrew's protocol, right? So 30 seconds max effort on, I prefer an assault bike, and then we'll have kind of 3 to 4 minutes complete rest, and we'll do that 3 to 5 times. Once a week, maybe twice if I can persuade it, twice a week. But we're seeing some results with doing that once a week. And I also like more of kind of a alactic power sprint. So get a max watts,
Mm.
6 second effort on the assault bike. And then the athlete has to hit kind of 95% of that in subsequent 6 second efforts. and we'll start with a longer rest, and we'll like over a minute, and then we'll decrease the rest, and we'll do that once a week across the camp as well. And then we'll have a recovery kind of cardio session as well. And, if they like running, do want to go and do like, steady state. But that one, I'll say, breathe through your nose or just keep it a kind of conversational pace. Or my preferred would be a mixture of different things. So run for 5 minutes, row for 5 minutes, ski erg for 5 minutes, just kind of so that you're stimulating, just getting more blood flow into more muscles if you're using it for the purposes of kind of regeneration. So that would be my ideal.
It also gives you some variation when you're doing it like that, too. So you're not doing potentially going overuse from sitting on a bike for an hour or running for an hour. You can at least spread it around.
Exactly right. And if you're running, if you're running every day, a lot of the guys are running 4 or 5 days a week. Yes, it's a great tool, but one of the things, they get better and better at running. They get more and more efficient at running.
Just like your circuits. They get better and better at your circuits.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years, right? So the point is then, it's like, well, it's becoming harder and harder to stress the cardiovascular system or the capillary network because you're so efficient. So again, mixing it up if you're trying to stress the cardiovascular system is probably a good idea, because you're not as efficient perhaps at rowing or something, so you're going to get more of an effect there. But yeah, the circuit's exactly right. You're trying to get that efficiency. So I'll do that for 4 weeks, and I change it so the second 4 weeks looks different, and it's much more explosive, and it's closer to what you'd recognize as like a Tabata, kind of 6 to 10 seconds of max effort, 15 to 30 seconds of active rest. That's usually just like very light shadowboxing or kind of moving around, and we'll do that for 4 to 6 minutes using 2 different exercises, and we'll do 4 to 6 rounds of that, but with like long rest in between.
Interesting. So that's that second block of your super circuit then is 2 exercises. It's just like a superset instead of the 4 to 6.
Kind of, yeah. So it might have like a loaded kind of movement jump, or a tuck jump, some kind of really explosive, like repeated jump, and then the same with the upper body, so like a clap press up or some kind of variation like that. So it'd be like 6 to 10 seconds of effort, 15 to 30 seconds of active rest. So like your squats, then a bit of shadowboxing, your press ups, and a bit of shadowboxing, and that'll be just repeated then, kind of 4 to 6 minutes, and we'll take 4 minutes of passive rest. And then we'll do, different variations. So a different type of jump and some med ball work. I like my med ball work in that as well. So that's much more, that's all maximum intent. So rather than trying to maintain that consistency and rhythm, it's all about emptying the tank and, being as explosive and aggressive as possible. But then switching into that, again, that kind of relaxed state in the active rest. And again, I see that as a big performance advantage, because boxing has those periods where you're on the back foot and you're recovering, but you're disguising your recovery with your movement, with your feints, all that kind of stuff. And you have to be able to kind of relax and recover under pressure.
No, I like that. That's perfect. And I think that's everything I had for you today. But where can people follow you, find you, and see what you're doing online?
Yeah, find me on Instagram at the Fight Lab UK.
Perfect. I'll link that up in the description too for everyone. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything.
Great. Cheers, mate. Thanks very much for the invite. Appreciate it.